Whatever we say, on our heads be it.
Like this party boy from the Gold Coast banging models on the weekend. Flew from Sydney over to Perth to go and be with her. Only when he arrives, he finds out she's got a boyfriend she's run back to after the show finished filming.
Oh, God.
So, fucking terrible person. I can't stand her.
Hi guys, welcome to our brand new podcast. It's been in the works a while. We've spoken about it, we've drawn it up, we've workshopped about it, and finally we've arrived with Divorce Beheaded Thrives. And what better a first guest? I can't really believe it, to be honest. It started with a DM. Adrian slid into his DMs, and the man himself, Harrison, is coming on our podcast to share all of the tea.
I'm excited for it, but I've always been slightly not with everyone's opinions on Harrison, so I can't wait for it. You know, I think it's actually not what we actually intended for the podcast. We don't actually really intend on this podcast being a Married at First Sight podcast. It's not that, but we can't not share this opportunity with you. So what a great way to start, to be honest, because you know what? I quite like a controversial subject, and he is the epitome of controversial.
He certainly is. And I think any insight, gosh, I can't wait to hear some more about how Aussie MAFS works, see how it's different from ours. And I just want to understand from him what his perspective is. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. I have a bit of an opinion going into it, but let's see if he can waver that.
I don't know what I'm going to expect, whether I'm going to swing my opinion or not. So far, my opinion is a little unclear, so let's hope that he clears that up. I mean, we've taken your questions and we're going to be posting them to him, so let's go meet the man himself. Let's get him on.
Let's get into it.
Right, and we'll begin with Harrison taking his clothes off.
From here down, it's just completely naked. Don't say anything. It's my method.
Okay, right. So a couple of things that I wanted to say before we start this as well. There is no producer, and whatever we say, on our heads be it. So I reckon that we should dip in by saying, firstly, thank you for joining us. Let's kick off, Harrison, with your feelings on representation of the show, because I know when we were on the show, it was pulled into question by quite a lot of the cast members.
I know for a fact I didn't get a fair edit. I think they were trying to portray a certain archetype and a certain narrative with me. They cherry-picked all of the worst bits in order to make that happen. Equally, I don't think Bronte got a fair edit. I think if they'd showed Bronte's behaviour and what was driving me to say and do certain things, I think people would have just gone, these two are just toxic together, rather than making me look like the toxic one.
I feel that the perception from this place has been the two of you were toxic together.
That's interesting because that's been the overwhelming majority of people's opinions here as well. And yet the network hid 90% of Bronte's behavior. So imagine how bad she must have been, what they didn't show, in order for her to look equally as bad as me when I'm just reacting to it. I'll give you an example. When Bronte and I had our first big fight that was on camera, it was on the balcony and she's sitting there with the sunglasses on. They cut all of my arguments out of what I said to her on the balcony, which was, I told you I was writing leave at the first commitment ceremony. And she was acting like she got all blindsided at the first commitment ceremony. She wasn't expecting me to write leave because I sent her a text message a few days beforehand saying I'm not going anywhere. She was trying to make out like I sent that text message and then lied to her or misled her going into the commitment ceremony. What the audience doesn't know is that in that few days, I brought her coffees. I tried to go on a walk and talk with her. I was giving her a lot of what I could do from a distance because she'd asked me for space. And in that few days, I was like, I'm not here to just live in this apartment on my own, isolated. I haven't seen the person I'm supposed to be in a relationship with. This isn't what I signed up for. So I went and saw her that morning of the commitment ceremony and said, hey, I'm leaving. And that conversation superseded anything I might have said in the past about wanting to stay or whatever. Afterwards, the audience sees Bronte saying, I can't believe he wrote leave. I'm so blindsided. And then on the balcony, she's going, you said you weren't going anywhere in this text message you sent me 3 days ago. And I'm going, that's irrelevant. Like, you knew I was leaving. We had a conversation this morning. And see, this is where it gets tricky. Production cut all of that out. So you really only see me going, yeah, I've never been with someone like you before. And that's totally not what that whole conversation was about.
I do remember it being a little confusing watching it and thinking, something doesn't quite add up here, which as the season went along, I did start to rewatch a few of your scenes and I was like, does this make sense? Did this happen? I'd said to Sophie, you can see where words he said has been chopped.
Massively. So we sit down a couple of days later and I bought her what is now being hailed as the titty cake, which was a really nice cupcake with a flower and it had like a glazed cherry on top, and the flower petal fell off. So it just looked like the glazed cherry and the white, it just looked like a titty. Anyway, when we sat down, so I said, like, she's like, do you want to talk? Bronte would not talk to me unless there was cameras in the room. And she goes, let's talk. And I was like, okay, like, let's do it. I've got nothing to hide. You got to remember, at this point in time, I didn't know production was going to cut everything out that I said. So we sit down and they cut the entire argument out except for the end where I turn to Bronte and I'm saying, there's no issue in the way I communicate. There's an issue in the way you communicate, right? And it just makes me look like the biggest gaslighting fuckwit of all time, where I just take no accountability, no responsibility for the things I say, and just completely turn it around on her all the time. The only reason the audience would think that is because they haven't got anything in its entirety or anything in its true context. Like, if you get to know me, I'm actually a really reasonable guy, and I do take the most responsibility of myself, always looking at myself going, how did I fuck up? How did I get in this position? What have I done wrong? Before I ever would communicate with someone else about their shortcomings. Yeah, for production to cut all of that out and then simply just show the parts that they've just very clearly painted a picture in the edit. And everyone that gets a good edit always comes out and goes, yeah, that's how it was. That's totally fair. You know, other people's edits could have even been worse because they've got a vested interest in the outcome of their edit, right? And then you always see the people that get fucked over on my show or, you know, on the Australian MAFS come out and go, that edit was fucked. You don't see it. And they do it every year. For lack of a better way of saying this, I've got definitive proof that they fucked with my edit. You know, I've been on multiple interviews over here in Australia. I've said, look at this video, and Bronte's not even speaking, yet you can hear her voice. And they've used audio from 3 separate interviews and they've chopped specific words out of each interview and kind of like mushed it all together to make a sentence that doesn't even sound the same.
A sentence together. They've strung a sentence together.
No, let me see if I can find it for you while we're on this call. They have chopped different audios. You can't, and the reason they've done it is because they actually pan away from Bronte into the audience, into the other cast members, I should say, because they're stealing audio from other interviews. So I don't know if you'll be able to hear this, but
when I said I wanted to leave, it was because I was scared.
Do you hear the vocal range change 3 separate times? Did you hear that? You could see it very clearly when I had that back and forth with Claire at the dinner table. And then they showed me smirking. I wasn't even smirking in their direction, but just the fact that I was smirking, it was completely to another conversation at another part of the evening. But just the fact that I was smirking, it made it look like I was really happy with myself for like destroying someone's relationship. You and I were saying, Adrian, we were having a chat off air about the fact that they can't really get away with that as much in the UK.
One thing that sort of sat comfortable with us when we were filming is because obviously we've had more experience with the Australian version, our producers were like, okay, but you also have to understand that the TV laws are wildly different. You cannot be misplaced. You can sue us if we choose to move your sentence from speaking to Susan to speaking to John. We can't do that. It can't be out of sync. And it also can't be out of a timeline where yours seems to be more manipulated.
Do you think then, Harrison, that completely changes how things come across, or do you still think it delivers it in the same way? Because if they're editing it, but it still has the same end result, like the arguments still have the same end result and the couch and things like that, then do you think they're manipulating it to the point of it coming across completely differently, or are they still depicting the same?
Well, yeah, I mean, to hear Bronte say, I wrote stay because I was scared, and when Bronte never actually said that, that paints a really different picture. It paints a picture of a really toxic, maybe an abusive relationship. And especially when a woman's scared in a relationship, right? That is like alarm bells start ringing. And I'm really upset that they did that to me. Because if Bronte's scared, then who's the problem? Who's the aggressor? It incites a lot of questions and, gets people thinking and talking and like, is he abusive behind closed doors? Is there more to the story that we're not seeing, right? And really, in a lot of ways, that's kind of illegal. It's illegal to shout fire in a cinema. You know what I mean? It's really, and it kind of also, it places Bronte into a category that she doesn't really belong. Like, Bronte's no victim. Bronte went in there to play the game very, very hard. I don't know if you guys heard Bronte's leaked voice messages before the season aired, but Bronte knew exactly who I was. She intended to play this whole thing up and put on an act for the cameras the entire time. That is no victim. But the network trying to paint her in that light paints me as an abuser when I'm clearly not. I never raised my voice. I never said anything derogatory to her. I never called her names. I never put her down. So to try and paint that as if maybe that's what's going on behind closed doors, when in reality, I was just being gaslit and manipulated by my partner. And I was just struggling to tread water in the relationship. I never knew where I stood with Bronte. I never trusted anything she said. And the couple of weeks that we were really good and hanging out and getting along, they were enough for the, because we're in the Sky Suites, which is this apartment block together. And that was enough for the Stockholm syndrome to kind of kick in. And, you kind of fall into the trap of being isolated together. And that alone is enough to get those feelings, to paint this picture that wasn't the case and that this was a really abusive relationship. And, in stealing audio from different interviews in order to mash that sentence together to paint that picture, it gives the audience a really unfair image of what our relationship was like and a really unfair image of what I was like in the relationship. Whereas if they hadn't have done that, if they had portrayed the relationship fairly and showed Bronte's behavior and why I was struggling, they never told my story. If they had shown that, the audience would probably go, this guy's pretty intelligent, he's pretty reasonable, and this chick is just playing him like a fucking musical instrument. But instead, they went, this guy, we can make this guy look like the toxic male. All we have to do is just kind of show the story from her perspective. And to her credit, Bronte played a really good victim. Like, she was always saying the right things. Oh, you make me feel crazy and you don't listen to my emotions and blah, 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 and all that stuff that, for lack of a better way of putting it, women feel like in their own relationship a lot of the time. So, yeah, it was just very easy for the network to go in a certain direction. And if you look at my season of MAFS this year, they haven't made really any woman look toxic. Like, Alyssa looked emotionally needy.
I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, no, okay,
Alyssa and Taylor, I think.
Let me put it this way. The toxic ones got away with it, and the ones that are really nice, like genuinely nice people, were made out to look toxic. I'll put it that way. Like, Claire kissed Adam on a night out, had absolutely no chemistry with Jesse. They never slept together. They never lived together. The only time they showed any affection was when the camera was in the room. They didn't have a real relationship. And when I found out from Bronte that Claire was just playing this part to string Jesse along to make herself look better, and I called her out for it, they still made Adam look like the bad person. They actually put the breakdown of that relationship on Jesse himself, as if Claire had absolutely no accountability in that situation. It was seriously, the way the show was put together this year was fucking pathetic.
Were you there that night with the night out with Jesse and Claire and Adam?
No.
Were there quite a lot of people there? Was it most of the cast, or was it just a select few?
No, I actually missed out on a lot of weekends and nights out with the cast, because on weekends that we weren't filming, I would drive out and see my son. So I kind of got a break from it some weekends, fortuitously placing that relationship as a priority. I kind of didn't get involved in a lot of like the off-screen drama that a lot of the other cast members did.
Yeah.
Like, with the butt dial and the kiss and all that sort of stuff. Like, I wasn't there for that. Like, man, if I was there talking about Bronte when that butt dial whole thing went down, holy shit.
One thing that I think is interesting and maybe not as heavy, do you guys have mobile phones?
Yeah, we're allowed our phones during filming, yeah. But we're allowed our phones during the production of MAFS while it's on. But as soon as there's cameras in the room and a producer around, they take it off you just for the filming block, and then you get it back after they're done getting their filming. I always thought it was odd that at my wedding, Jess had her phone to show Bronte my photos and who I was. So that's a key into the fact that production was setting that whole thing up. Production knew all about
Right.
it. And they knew all about it because all the girls had told it. I got played the minute I walked down that aisle. I had production and Bronte playing me the entire time. I got told that Bronte's reaction wasn't strong enough when Jess tried to show her the phone about who I was, because Bronte already knew who I was. She sort of went, oh my God, and was like really faking it. They shot that 6 times until they got
No.
that face from her. They shot that 6 times. So you tell me
Wow.
how fake this shit was. I got fucking played. I just wish my platform wasn't on top of a domestically abusive portrayal.
I think that's what's a little tricky about what you were saying before. Sort of when it falls under sort of like the evil character sort of thing, I sort of think it's entertaining and it's fun. And
Yes.
that's TV and that's okay. But
Yeah.
when you start discussing like she's scared, abusive, then that's accusational to a point of damaging someone's character for life. You know, you're starting to suggest things about a person that are not entertainment. They're not okay. And there was maybe a few issues that I personally would say, from my point of view of watching the show, you played the part of the villain, where someone like Shannon, I was like, that's not healthy. How is he saying these things? How is he speaking to her? Damaging her for life. That's not healthy. Where I personally felt with your relationship, which is why I've always been a bit of a fan, is that it felt like both of you were just sort of knew sort of the situation to a degree and sort of could it felt more playful.
I think because Bronte was so over dramatic and so fake and everything was so performative from her end, I feel like people put me in the same basket with her, that we were just like doing this fake relationship, because how could we have gone from so bad to so good, then back to so bad again? Well, I mean, that sucks, because that's the roller coaster I was on. You know, once you're on the roller coaster, you can't just take the seatbelt off and get off. That's the roller coaster I was on. And it's really pissed me off that she's come across as so fake, and it's painted me in the same light. But I guess in a way I'm thankful for that, because if anyone actually took Bronte seriously, they might take some of her bullshit claims seriously as well. Like, she's made all sorts of claims since getting off the show that just people just roll their eyes at her now. So in a way it's good, but at the same time, I kind of wish that I just wish that I got a better run. You know, I wish that I got matched with someone that was there for the right reasons and not there to just play it up for the cameras like she said she was going to. And I can't speak on Shannon's relationship, because, you know, I like them both. I like Caitlin and Shannon. And I think what they went through together was just extremely toxic. Shannon came in with a lot of baggage. I think he was just not in the right headspace to do the show. And I think really the only one to blame for that's production, right? Because they knew where he was at in his life. They interviewed him. And to put him in there with quite a vulnerable young woman is, I think, unethical.
Obviously, you said maybe Shannon wasn't in a position, which, yeah, agreed. Clearly, you know, he had a lot of baggage going into it. Obviously, you know, you were dating up to the point and have admitted that, like up to the wedding day, and you want someone that was in it for the right reasons. Were you literally prepared that day to get married and hopefully it be the person for the rest of your life? Like, were you in a position mentally, do you think, to do that?
Yeah, I was. But see, the thing is, I'd been approached to do other projects before. And you get very close to the finish line, and then they go, like, the network might go a different direction and hire someone else or use someone else. And so I kind of got used to that, all the promises, all the yeses, getting very close to the finish line, and then the project goes in a different direction. And so I was just like, well, I've been through these motions a few times before. I got approached for The Bachelorette one season, got very close through the process, and then right before I was due to go into the mansion, they went a different direction with a couple of the cast members, not just me. And then I got approached for The Bachelor and got quite through that process again. And then they went a different direction on this season of The Bachelor. They actually used 3 guys instead of 1 bachelor. And then so the MAFS thing came up and I was like, well, I've been through this process before of being approached for a television show. I've gotten all the way to the end and it's fallen through. So I think the thing for me this time is I'm just not going to stop living my life. And then if it happens, it happens. So that was my mindset, was if I'm going to keep living my life up until the minute I walk down the aisle. And then when I walk down the aisle, that's when I'm making the commitment.
But like me personally, I was found really early on in the process. I was one of the first found, even though I went in late. So like for 5 months before, I didn't date anyone, didn't see anyone, didn't speak to anyone.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm not going to name names, but since talking to other cast members, I'm definitely not alone in that approach. I know other people that had things going on up until the moment they walked down the aisle, and yeah, so I'm not alone in that. It depends on your personal approach to how you want to go about it.
I would second that and say you're not alone in our season as well. Not me personally. I actually was very open about saying I'd applied and then they approached me to come on the show, but I was dating someone. So I said, no, thank you. That ended. And I called them back and was like, oh, maybe you can find me a husband then. But I know other members of our cast. I mean, I know that there was one who the night before his wedding night got a bit frisky. People can also have different types of relationships now, can't they? They can have a marriage that is fully loving and fully faithful, but it can be open. So, I think that there's all sort of ways of seeing these things. And if you can be with someone and then separate it. But I also understand, I was with a guy that I dated in the past, and he went in for a kiss, and I was like, actually, no, can't do this. I'm getting married in 2 weeks. Bye. And I ran and left because I had a heart attack.
It's probably different for an old flame because there's like more feelings, not just chemistry there. Whereas the people I was dating, there were no feelings. It was just physical chemistry, sexual chemistry. So I didn't really feel like I was cheating on anyone or doing anything. I didn't think I was doing anything nefarious by dating around while I was single.
Thing is, I would probably, to a degree, agree, because I know that I can be as free loving as I want to be because I'm single. I can do whatever I like. But the second I'm in a relationship, I know I'm the most committed guy out there. I know that that's not questioned. So I don't know that I would be able to question someone. I could be sleeping with someone and then meet the love of my life the next day and boom, everything's gone. There you go, done.
I would never risk what I have with Gina now. I read this great quote that said, don't throw away a diamond to chase glitter. I feel like I've got a diamond in Gina, so I'm not going to risk that.
Okay, something that I really wanted to touch on, which I feel like is important for you. It's interesting to see how they did not include your life as a father and what you feel that weighs on you as a character on a TV show. Your introduction, they mentioned you were a father. From there on in, it wasn't really a thing. So I thought that you might want to discuss that.
Why don't you give me your opinion and I'll tell you if I agree with it.
Cheeky monkey. I would say that it makes a person colder to take their children away. I think it's easier to love a person, child. But saying that though, Alyssa,
it made my relationship being abusive more believable, because if I'm an amazing father, how could I be an abusive partner? And look, I'm sure there are people out there that are amazing dads that have had toxic relationships or been abusive. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying it's a much bigger stretch to go from great dad to abusive partner. It's a much bigger stretch. And also, I think it just made me more one-dimensional. If you're a great dad and you've got a soft spot for your son, I feel like people will identify with you a lot more. They see the good in you. Whereas if they don't show that and they only show you having this toxic relationship, it's very easy for the audience just to think that that's who you are.
Sorry, that was my opinion, that it sort of dehumanizes you a little further.
They have to make easier to digest, more one-dimensional characters for the audience. And the UK audience, from what I'm told, is much more discerning to reality television. You guys have a lot more reality TV to choose from over there. So you want real characters and real storylines. And The UK audience seems to be a little bit less into like the showmanship and more into like, we want to get into the nitty gritty of what makes these people tick.
Okay, guys, quick interruption. Hope you're enjoying it so far. We are about to get into asking him some of the really juicy questions. We actually lost connection with Harrison here, so I had to give him a call to enable us to be able to continue. So enjoy the rest of the show. I would say the second half is the best bit. So I would say, like, you and Melinda became frenemies. I felt like there was a tiny bit of something going on there. I felt like there was some cheeky little looks, but who knows if those looks were real.
No, I'd say that's more the editing, them trying to portray it like there was
a spark.
Anything there. Melinda was not. I was never attracted to Melinda.
That's absolutely fair. All right. So, if any more hard questions?
Hard question. Well, I mean, we can get to them. I want to know more about the castmates. I mean, what did you think about Melinda and Leighton's relationship from your perspective, Harrison?
Again, another relationship that wasn't portrayed in its truest light. Like, Melinda and Leighton had a tumultuous relationship. They fought like cats and dogs. Leighton and Melinda walked out on each other multiple times while we were filming. Yeah,
I do think we saw that. I do think we did see some of that. We did see a lot of their arguments. I think we got the impression that they did argue a lot through the relationship. But do you feel like it was even worse than that?
No, they didn't portray it in. You don't see them walking out on each other. You don't see them having big blow-ups and packing their bags and leaving. None of that.
No, they did just sort of say it happened, didn't they? We didn't really see it. They just said, we argue a lot, we argue a lot, we argue a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Well, saying something. Yeah, exactly. You don't see it, so the audience doesn't get. The audience goes off by what they see on the screen, right? So, yeah, by not seeing it, they didn't portray the relationship in its truest context. That's why when they're on the couch and they're going like, we don't know how to move forward, we're just like, this relate. And there was a lot of things that were said on that couch that weren't shown, where they're going like, yeah, we're happy, we're good. And then next minute, Melinda was crying on the couch. They didn't show that. And then they show her sort of pull herself together and then say, we don't know how to move forward. And that's when I chimed in. I'm like, you guys keep trying to portray this good front together on the couch when clearly it's not working. None of us are buying it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, we had that. We had one couple that wouldn't bring everything to the couch, so it does happen. But I mean, they are still together now, well, as far as we're aware from.
As far as we know, Melinda and Leighton are still together.
They are, yeah. But what I'm saying is that they didn't get the edit of the show didn't portray their relationship in an accurate light.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see, like, they'd said that they were arguing, but it wasn't really shown. We didn't really see them have much of a row.
They had a pretty, I'm sure they had good moments, but they had some pretty terrible moments on the show that weren't shown. So, yeah, the whole thing, they show you what they want to show you to portray a narrative and a storyline for each couple.
No, that's understandable. I have a question for you. I think I picked up on this from something you said. It might have been on Dom and Ella's podcast, actually. You mentioned Lindell was like emotionally cheating or emotionally something with Hugo and someone else. We didn't see any of that. Do you have a perspective on that?
Yeah, so she would talk to Hugo for like 4 hours on the phone some days.
Wow. While in the experiment or after?
Yes, while in the experiment. They even caught up a couple of times off camera, to my knowledge, on a bit of like a coffee date. And then she did the same thing to Josh after the show wrapped. He even flew over to Perth and said, I'm falling in love with you, because Josh is very into communication, and how do I put this? I'm still friends with Josh, so I don't want to put this in an unfair, but he's very susceptible to female attention.
Right.
When a woman pays attention, he tends to move quite quickly, and because Lindell was getting a lot of emotional stimulation from Josh and Hugo that she wasn't getting from Cameron, so she really lent on them, and in a lot of ways was emotionally cheating on Cameron during the show's filming. So then when it finished, these guys thought that they were in a relationship with Lindell. Josh flew from Sydney over to Perth to go and be with her, Only when he arrives, he finds out she's got a boyfriend she's run back to after the show finished filming.
Oh, God.
So, yeah, there's a lot with Lindell that just wasn't shown. Lindell's a fucking terrible person. I can't stand her.
So at the beginning, obviously, she had kind of her storyline, and I think we backed, you know, Cam and Lindell at the beginning. But to be honest, I didn't like overly fall in love with her over the show. I did see, you know, through a few things. Yeah.
Yeah, I was never really for Lindell, but she does have quite a queen status here. I would say people
Yeah.
absolutely
For
love her.
the final
It's
vows situation. Yeah, people loved what she did at the final vows. I was quite shocked by that.
Sorry, you go, Cam.
Everyone
Harrison.
loves that story, though, of the girl that overcomes her illness to have another shot at life. Like that's a great, easy to digest story. It's a feel good story.
Yeah,
but it doesn't take away from who Lindell is as a person, right? So if you take the cystic fibrosis away from Lindell, and you take that overcoming that story, that narrative away from her, what you are left with is quite a vindictive, manipulative, mean-spirited person who got involved in everyone's relationship, who was a huge gossip, and just picked everyone's struggles to take on as her own, and never got involved in a relationship in a positive way. Like, you could see me on the couch. She was always attacking me on Bronte's behalf. And it's like, Lindell, fair enough if you want to critique my behaviour, but when I'm sitting down with the experts, right, that's my time to be working on the relationship.
Yeah.
You coming at me and attacking me at that moment in time doesn't actually benefit my relationship. What you're doing that for is to try and get airtime for yourself and stick up for Bronte, who really, in those moments, should have been sticking up for herself. If it was an issue for Bronte, Bronte should have been raising it. Bronte doesn't need you to be the voice for her at those commitment ceremonies. So I just never liked her, not from day one. And, yeah, her behaviour since the show has only further galvanised my opinion on her.
Is there anything particular there that you would be talking about?
Yeah, I mean, she played Josh, a friend of mine. She had like 5 guys on the go at one stage. If you take into account Josh, Hugo, the boyfriend, and then there was a couple of other guys that got mentioned while Josh was over in Perth. That's like 5 guys that she couldn't make a relationship work. None of them are with her now. So I just feel like, you know, and then she's taken shots at my girlfriend online on Facebook.
Right.
You know, she's taken shots at me since the show. Yeah, I just think Lindell's just quite a spiteful, you know, immature little girl who's got a lot of growing to do.
Okay.
Interesting.
Very, very interesting. Okay, one couple that I would really like to ask you about is Jessie and Claire. Now, it seemed at that dinner party that you were pretty instrumental with causing the break in that relationship there from that point, and sort of planting that seed or helping that seed grow that Jessie had in his mind. What would you sort of say on that standpoint from then, and also what's going on with them now? Because we don't really know.
If one comment from me breaks them up, what kind of relationship did they really have in the first place?
I get that.
Yeah, that's fair. It seemed very, very fragile, and I think that massively, got in his head. But since the show, I mean, they seemed like they were friendly, and then since it seems like they've completely fallen out. Are they even friends now?
No, Jessie can't stand her. No, I think I just ripped the bullshit veil off Jessie's eyes that Claire was trying to put there. Like, Jessie didn't want to stand up to Claire because she would shout down. Claire was she was just too much for Jessie. Claire was just way too much for Jessie, and she would just overpower him in arguments. And it got to the point where he didn't want to get into conflict with her anymore. It was just easier to appease her and stay on the show. He asked her multiple times, please write leave with me this week. I want to go back to Perth.
Really? And he'd asked her directly, please write leave.
Couples retreat, right? This was before Bronte told me that Claire was just in it for the show. When we went to the couples retreat, you don't see any of this on the TV. We sat down at the fire pit and all the boys were talking about their relationship. And I asked Jesse to his face. I was sitting next to him and I looked him in the eye and I asked him, I said, do you think she likes you? Do you think there's chemistry there? And he said, no. He said, we're just friends. And that's when I told Bronte, like, I went back to my room. You know, we shared what the girls talked about, her experience at girls' night, her leaving. I told her about the boys and their relationship and what they told me. That's when Bronte goes, yeah, Claire told me that she's just in it to try and redeem her image with Jesse. It's the cheating thing. And I said, fuck that. I said, I'm not going to let that happen to Jesse. That's when I decided I was going to tell him.
You would say that you delivered a harsh medicine.
I would say that it's not the way I wanted to deliver it, but I'm not going to sit there while Claire attacks my relationship from a glass house throwing stones.
Yeah.
So I dropped a little truth bomb on her glass house and she didn't like it.
Okay. So is there anything since the show that you could tell us about their situation, or are they just completely estranged now?
Yeah, I don't think they talk anymore. I don't think they're friends. I think Claire tried to keep that going for a while to show that, no, they were in a good, they did have some good baseline friendship, but even that fell apart. I just think Jesse can't stand her now, to be honest. I think he just sees straight through her.
My question would be, obviously, since the show, some stuff's come out. I think the biggest thing most recently, obviously now you've all got your Instagrams back and stuff, is Duncan and Evelyn. And there's lots of speculation that perhaps that kicked off during the experiment or when they did the wife swap, because they did get on really well, whether that was friendly or more. What's your thoughts on them kicking off their relationship? Did you see it coming or?
No one really saw it coming. I've been out with them and I've sort of seen them sneakily leave to go home together, and I sort of wondered what was going on there.
Right.
I kind of just sleeping together, but it turns out that they're happy and they found each other. And I think it happened off the show. I don't think it happened during the wife swap.
Do you think that it was happening when the reunion happened?
No.
Okay, because that was my first thought, that they'd sort of kept it quiet to dodge the bullet that might have happened at that reunion dinner party.
I mean, potentially. What do I know? I don't see through walls. It could have happened on the wife swap. I could be talking absolute shit. I'm just giving you my opinion.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Shall we go to some of the questions that we've got from the public?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so I'm going to
narcissist.
Right, so here we go. Right, so I'm going to start with I think is funny, but also awful at the same time. So I'm going right in, and this is quoted from it, okay? So, was Harrison the dick everyone thought he was, or is he some sort of clever, creative genius?
Well, now that you guys have gotten to know me, I really have to ask you that question. Do you think I'm an asshole, or do you think I'm just a clever genius?
I did say quite early on, I thought, you know what, I think he's intelligent and funny. I definitely think he's an arrogant little twat. But I think he's a funny guy. Me and Sophie were driving, listening to your podcast with Ella and Dom. And Sophie was like, Adrian, you and Harrison have the same humour.
Yeah.
Right. That's why I like him, man.
I suppose not a turning point, but where I did think you had a bit of a sense of humour, and I think that they were doing you dirty by editing it quite heavily, because you'd seem very sort of sarcastic and dry. But when you did the date with the picture, that was pretty fucking funny.
Yeah, that was good. I mean, I took that whole thing quite just completely ridiculously, and they edited it. All of the punchlines that could have landed, they edited them out and drew them out, so they became a bit more cringy instead of funny.
See, I would say that
I do agree with you. I think the editing had a lot to do with why that didn't land.
See, it landed for me. It was one of my highlights of the show. I thought it was absolutely hilarious.
Yeah.
I loved it.
In the UK, we're quite dry and sarcastic, so I think it did land.
I'll tell you something that I did that was quite funny that didn't make it to the show. Was we got a bag of dildos, vibrators, and sex toys and things from Alessandra, the sex coach on the show. And the camera crew was in there one morning, and I was using this big vibrator as like a neck massager. I was making a cup of coffee, and I didn't have any clean spoons. So I just dipped the switched on vibrator into the coffee mug, and it was like swirling around in there and mixing the sugar into my coffee. And then I pulled the dildo out, smacked it on the kitchen sink, threw it in the dishwasher, and the cameraman was pissing himself laughing. Thought it was hilarious, but it didn't make it to. So I did heaps of like stupid things where I was just taking the piss out of myself and just being dumb and silly all the time because that's who I am as a person. But again, if they showed those things, it would have made me more three-dimensional. And I think that they were trying to really just play this particular negative narrative for me.
Okay. So I've got 3 words that came up a lot in the questions that I received, okay? They're not the most pleasant of words, so I'm just putting it to you. So 1 was narcissist, 1 was manipulator, and 1 was gaslighter. So do you have any response?
I've heard those words before.
No.
This is a shocking revelation for me.
Yeah, you got to say they were probably the most common words used. But what was interesting is people were saying, was he that? Is he really that? Because a lot of people have the opinion that you were almost playing up to the cameras to a degree, sort of leaning into the bad guy role.
Yeah, definitely. I felt like I kind of saw the writing on the wall about halfway through. After the couples retreat, I kind of thought, okay, you want a villain? I'll give you a villain. And then I just went fucking ham with it. Like that whole Claire thing. You could see me just totally in control of that whole situation. Claire was coming at me. I was just sitting there calm. I was like, all right, you want a villain? Well, here it is. And then I fucking, I destroyed that relationship. So it wasn't my intention to break them up. It was my intention to tell Jessie the truth. But yeah, I just didn't hold back anymore. I did lean into it, definitely.
I mean, it was...
but, again, that's the purpose of the show.
I think another thing that has been an issue for you is the tears. Because like you've sort of said, you sit very calmly, like we were, when me and you were talking yesterday, you'd said, you never raised your voice and you never, screamed or shouted at anyone or offended anyone or called them names, which I didn't see that you did. But would you say that maybe leans into the narcissist a little bit because you seem so calm and then suddenly from nowhere you're crying? And that, I think that on the TV, maybe that is to do with the edit, was difficult to commute.
Yeah, well, if you listen to the Dom and Ella podcast, and you would have heard me when they asked me about my son,
yeah,
I got emotional straight away. Like, I can't hold that back. When I start talking about my son and my relationship with him and the fact that he was taken away from me, that was the single hardest thing I've ever been through in my life. And I can't talk about that. I can't tell that story without getting emotional, right? A very real emotion for me. And it's absolutely no different to when I saw Bronte in pain. And then, she was bent over and crying and, there's blood coming out of her and all this shit that was going on behind the scenes. And they shoved me into this fucking commitment ceremony and started filming me in this high pressure environment. And I just it all just hit me in one moment. And, I couldn't even talk properly. I was so just kind of frazzled and on the spot. And, it just, it was a lot in that moment. And the audience doesn't get all of that context. They just get a guy who is being quite emotionless and reserved this entire time. Yeah. And then all of a sudden I show this emotion, it looks fake, and they're playing this stupid music over the top of it. And so I can understand. I watched it for myself and I was like, that's not how it happened at all. Yeah.
So you can see why it's been perceived the way that it is.
I can keep screaming to the high heavens that they've edited the show in a certain way to portray me in a certain light, but it's whether or not we'll understand that that's show business. That's how this goes together.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's fair. Okay. Another very common question was, did Dan get the girl's number?
Yes. Yeah, he did. I watched him.
Yeah, he did. Dirty bastard, that one. I wasn't a fan. I don't know if you're friends. I wasn't a fan.
See, production knew. I told my producer. I had basically said what had happened that night to Bronte, to the producers, to everyone. I had said what had happened. And they put it all on me, like I was lying, and that sort of behaviour was so beneath Dan. And he would never be that sort of guy. Because, again, Dan's portrayal on MAFS was of this buttoned-down, reserved businessman. They wanted him to look like someone who could be compatible or good for Sandy. When in reality, Dan is like this party boy from the Gold Coast banging models on the weekend, driving a Porsche. Right? So his portrayal on MAFS doesn't align at all with Dan's personality. 2 weeks after he was off the show, he's banging the girl from the front row at his wedding with the huge hits.
Yeah.
To insinuate that there's no way Dan would go and get a phone number that night is ridiculous. That's exactly the kind of guy that he is. That's why I love him. So, yeah, it's just, they put that all on me. If I was lying and throwing my mate under the bus to cover myself, no, that's Dan. This is what I said. I told the truth. I said we got this and we deleted them, and that's the end of the story. And he turns to me and goes, oh, no, I didn't get a number. I was like, okay. So if you want to play it, it's fine.
Would you say then, saying, you've told us what sort of guy Dan is, doesn't sound like someone who should go on Married at First Sight?
Well, why not? Why couldn't they have set him up with someone that he was asking for?
Oh, right. Okay. So he wanted a relationship
with that.
Okay.
But he went into a relationship straight after MAFS with that girl.
Okay.
So he did. He's single now. They didn't work out because of and the reason they didn't work out is not because because he played up on her or anything like that. They didn't work out because of the public backlash of their two relationship on the show, after the show. They accused her of cheating with him and a whole bunch of stuff, and it was really ugly, actually.
I felt very sad for Sandy because I felt like she, like you say, they didn't match them well, and I felt really she seemed like she'd given up so much to do it.
Yeah, okay.
No thoughts on Sandy then?
Look, I don't know. I just don't know. It's not my place to talk on Sandy's experiences in life, but
okay.
Yeah, you get to 36 and you haven't been in a serious relationship. Yeah, I just felt like that whole backstory was contrived.
Right.
To just paint her a certain light, the same way they did with Lindell. They love an underdog in the car. They love, someone who's overcome some big cultural or physical disability in order to find love. Such a great underdog story for the audience.
Okay. Do you mind if I sweep back to that retreat weekend? Because I really want to know your opinion on that butt dial.
It's already come out that was all fake. Rupert admitted it to all the guys.
Did he? We don't know that.
He's already said that. He said in a text message to Dan, he apologized and said he made it up with Evelyn, and yeah, it's already come out. So the only one still sticking to that story is Evelyn.
Oh, she's still standing by it.
Yeah.
I thought Evelyn was very intelligent. I thought she was I thought she played a very clever game. She's another one here in the UK who's a bit of a queen. I'm not entirely sure I would go down that route with her. She's seen here as such a queen. I'm not sure that I would put her in that bracket.
Yeah, the fact she was on Big Brother UK, I feel like anyone that's got a previous experience in TV when they go on MAFS, I always have a little bit of a, I don't know, just changes my perception a bit because she's already been through all of that TV stuff, whether it was years ago or not. So I do think she knows what she's doing.
Yeah, my issue with Evelyn was the very first week she was there, her husband goes out with the boys. They bring him into the fold. They take him out for drinks. They try and include him in the group, the boys' space, and the conversation hits the table as it always does on a night out with boys. We all inadvertently talk about our relationships at some point. Yeah, and so Rupert then takes that information back to his wife when he's drunk, offloads to her, and then she uses that as an opportunity to try and go at Dan at the dinner table about stuff, and Hugo, mind you, at the dinner table about stuff they'd said about their missuses on a night out. And Evelyn didn't even know Dan. Didn't even know the context of any of this stuff, nothing.
Yeah.
And she was so ready to throw Dan and his relationship under the bus. And she did. She destroyed their relationship, right? Now, she didn't even know Sandy or Dan. She hadn't even been there a week when this happened. I'd been there for 7 weeks getting to know Claire and Jessie.
Yeah.
When I said my bit about their relationship. So I had a lot more skin in the game when it came to their relationship and whether or not I was doing the right thing. Evelyn hadn't been there long enough to make that call, yet she happily destroyed a marriage in order to make herself look like the good person. That was my issue with Evelyn all along. And she destroyed that marriage with hearsay information and a half-cocked backstory on how she came across it in the first place.
Yeah, that backstory didn't really hold much. Well, I mean, I think we all know if you're in a bar, you can just about hear each other, let alone someone on the end of a phone.
Well, we took the piss. We went to establishment after the show finished, me and Dan and Josh on a night out, and we actually rang Evelyn, right? And she couldn't hear a word I said on the phone. So how could she have heard it up Rupert's ass?
Yeah, I didn't buy it. I didn't believe it at all. It was a bit dodgy. And you'd said that you and Bronte did a test or something, didn't you?
Yeah, because they're like, look, we've got screenshots, timestamps, and that sort of stuff. So me and Bronte just made the same thing that night. I just miscalled Bronte a couple of times, and she sent me a couple of text messages, and we screenshotted it and sent it to the group. And we're like, look how fucking easy this bullshit is. Like, there wasn't any date stamps on their screenshots. It was just timestamps.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
So go on, Sophie.
I was just going to say, this is more lighthearted, but so we're not right. So in the UK, we talk about like the differences and things. We're not allowed to do the where you rate how they like attractiveness scale. We don't do that because it's considered too much of kind of like a bad one, I don't know. But we do have questions that are like, who would you have rather been with? Like, who do you like? We'll do it in a group session. If you had to pick from any of the other wives, which do you feel like would have been either a better match or just that you had more of a vibe with?
All right, I'll answer that question right after I tell you just another quick funny story that never made it to air.
Okay.
So they filmed me and Bronte doing the photo challenge, and I put Bronte first, which you don't get to see, and then she put Duncan first, which you do see, which I found quite ironic after she was just complaining about me calling her, saying she wasn't attractive. Then she goes and puts another guy first in the photo challenge. So I kind of felt like, but no one really called her out for that. But anyway, she put Duncan first in the photo challenge. And what you don't see is you see me going, yeah, Duncan is dreamy. And then when they asked me to do the photo challenge, I put Bronte first. And then they go, is there any changes you want to make? And I said, yes. And I grabbed Duncan's photo and I brought it down and put him first in front of all the women. Right? And then I said, no, Duncan's far too special for that. And then I picked up the photo and walked over to the fridge and put Duncan's photo on the fridge. and I said, that's where Duncan's going to stay from now on. And we can both look at him because he's a dreamy looking guy, right?
Yeah.
And I just thought that was like quite funny. And I remember telling my friends and stuff like that off air about that I'd done that. And they're like, oh man, that's hilarious. There were some other things that I said as well that were quite funny. I can't really remember now, but there was some things along the way that I wish that they showed, because it does show my personality and that I'm willing to take the piss out of myself, and I don't take myself seriously at all.
Mm.
Yeah. Show that, who would I have swapped with out of all the girls? Probably Evelyn.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Sophie, who would you choose from the Australian cast to marry?
I mean, Duncan, so I feel like that's the obvious choice. Who else is there? Oh, Leighton, probs.
I'd go with Ollie or probably Harrison because it wouldn't be boring. See, my husband was a tricksy little one as well. Like he kept me on my feet. I quite like being kept on my feet, so it's quite fun. So
Well, I'm glad I don't have to really think about that anymore. I've got Gina now, and I'm very happy. So
good, very good.
Yeah, if I was to swap with any of the other cast members, and that's all I had to choose from, probably Ev. because I think her and Rupert were pretty open about the fact that they were just there for, to be on MAFS.
Oh, right.
And everyone knew that they sort of had a bit of an agreement to just sort of get through it.
That leads onto a question that I wanted to ask. I forgot about, actually. So one of the previous Australian MAFS cast told me that the majority of your cast had talent management before you went in.
Oh, I definitely didn't. I don't have any talent management now. So yeah, I don't know about that. But
so you don't know if other people did.
I don't know if other people do or not. No.
Okay.
I know other people have been signed. Like I saw on Leighton's story today that he got signed by Roxy Jasenko, who's an Australian talent manager.
So a really important thing that I must not forget about is the final commitment ceremony, because we were all a little bit shocked that we didn't get to see anything from you.
The final commitment ceremony for us was pretty quick compared to the other couples. They showed our relationship playback. They showed it on the screen. And then you got to remember, by this stage, I've been separated from Bronte for 6 weeks. We'd been broken up for 6 weeks by this point. And in that 6 weeks, I'd moved on. I'd started seeing other girls. I'd sort of, gone back to Abby, and I were seeing each other again. So I was sort of in a place where I was happy. I was single. I was dating. I didn't really have any commitments, and I was just sort of focusing on moving on with my life. And in that sort of 6 weeks, Bronte'd gone the other way. She'd gone politicking. She'd gone trying to hear about what I was up to from the other cast members, and she'd been messaging girls that I'd seen in the past, trying to dig up information for the reunion.
Ooh, tricky.
And then which I don't know. You guys tell me. Do you think it's acceptable a month after you break up with someone to start messaging their exes?
I probably would have done what Bronte did. I probably would have messaged that girl, being completely honest with you. I'd have messaged to find out more.
Well, why wouldn't you go looking for that clarity 3 months before, when we're in a relationship, when you're actually entitled to that sort of information, rather than a month after we break up?
I suppose at that point, potentially, because it was going well or well-ish, she didn't feel the need to do that, but then she wanted to gain that clarity and closure afterwards. I don't know. I'm just saying.
Or did she want dirt on him?
Hold on. So she finds out at the wedding, and let's pretend like the voice notes don't exist. They do, but let's pretend that they don't. Let's pretend that she really was innocent. Let's pretend that she really didn't know. Yeah. Right? Wouldn't you go searching for that clarity then, before you get into a relationship with the person?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Go through an entire 3-month relationship and then go looking for that clarity and closure 6 weeks after you break up.
Yeah, I guess she wanted the dirt.
She wanted dirt, surely. That's what my guess would be. She wanted to get something.
Put the shoe on my foot, right? How would you feel if I started texting your exes over a month after we break up? Like, you'd think I was a stalker. You'd think I was crazy. But women seem to get away with that for some reason.
I mean, if the shoe was on the other foot, I think they'd have the right to do that. If it was just before the wedding and they found out they were dating someone and they wanted to find the scoop on that, I think either party's entitled to do that, male or female.
But I think
before
once
the wedding,
say that,
yes, but not a month after you break up.
Yeah, I guess he's saying the intention is different after they break up. Yeah, I can see you would be like, why are you messaging my exes? We've broke up, leave it, let it go. I would say that.
Yeah, definitely. The intention wasn't closure. The intention was to dig up dirt. She said, Bronte, I'm happy to send you the screenshot of what Bronte sent Abby. But in the text that Bronte sent to Abby, she goes, I have no intention of talking to Harrison. I just want to know what happened between you two. And see, that's the thing. If you have no intention of talking to me, of getting any real closure on the issue, why are you messaging Abby a month after we've broken up? So to answer your question, when we sat down on the couch, and I sat down with Mel, Alessandra, and John, I actually watched our relationship back on the screen, and even though it was edited and all that sort of stuff, the first words out of my mouth were, yeah, there's some behavior in there that I'm not proud of. And if I could go back and do things differently again, I would. And John said to me, what behavior are you not proud of? And I said, I don't think I ever really listened to Bronte. I feel like when we would get into an argument or some conflict, I would always be listening to her, waiting and thinking for the next thing I was going to say, instead of really taking on board where she was coming from. And I said, I think I've been selfish in this relationship because I was so used to being single. I came out of single life and into this relationship, and I was quite selfish, and I wasn't willing to compromise or meet in the middle with Bronte. And for that, I'm sorry. And I apologized to Bronte in front of all the cast. And then they said, do you have anything else what mistakes did you make? And I said, oh, look, I'm not perfect. I made mistakes. And they said, in what way are you not perfect? And I said, yeah, like I've owned what I did wrong in the relationship. I said, that there were things that I would change if I could, situations that I would do differently. But I'm only 50% of this relationship. So I'm only 50% of why it didn't work out. And I'm owning my 50%. Really, in that moment, it was a bit of a stroke of genius for me, because I kind of owned my half of why the relationship didn't work out. And that caused the experts then to divert onto Bronte and start asking her why she didn't think the relationship worked out. They said to Bronte, what's your 50%, Bronte? And Bronte goes, oh, I just came in here with the rose-coloured glasses on, and I wanted everything to be perfect, and it wasn't. And I said to Bronte, that's a cop-out. What behaviour of yours? Why didn't it work out? And Bronte just started shouting, you're a narcissist, over and over again. And I think there was just no way that they could have, because I took accountability for it, and because I owned my half of the relationship and she didn't, and she just went crazy, I don't think there was a way that they could have shown it without her looking insane. And they just went, well, this isn't going to fit the storyline. As the show was airing, the voice notes came out quite early on in the piece. They sort of came out 3, maybe 4 weeks into the show. They were still editing the finale when those voice notes broke in the media.
Right.
So I just think the voice notes combined with Bronte at the end, it just didn't fall under the narrative that the show had been perpetuating this entire time. So they just went, let's just cut it. And I think the network was quite embarrassed by Bronte, because they'd really built her up to be this victim on the show, and it was a real slap in the face to everyone. Even like all the other cast members dropped her as well. Like she lied to everyone.
Yeah. Right. I think that was a huge thing to come out, and for it to come out during the show while it was on, not even afterwards. We had something like that. Someone was arrested in our series. It changed the whole perspective on a lot of things that happened. And I think that was the same with Bronte. Like, that was a turning point for me as well, where I just saw through it all and I thought, well, you already knew about all this. And it is a pretty big thing that they removed your whole couch off of the reunion. I think that was, big move by them.
Was such.
Well, I actually think they did that as a bit of a fuck you to me, because I finally really just sat down and took full accountability for myself, which is what everyone had been asking for the entire time. And I finally said, okay, like, I get it, guys. I'm sorry for this behavior, and in future I won't do it again. And it just didn't fit the storyline. The network didn't want to give me that relief. They wanted me to be the bad guy from start to finish. It is what it is. I don't really give a fuck, to be honest. I know the truth. I know what happened. I know what I said. I don't really need validation from the public in order to confirm that for me.
It was confusing to not see you guys get on the sofa. You're like, what? Like, you were such a heavy part of the season. You were one of the most important couples as far as plots were going. And then you weren't given much of a conclusion. There's one more person that we haven't discussed, and actually has been probably, especially near the end of the series, was probably one of the biggest topics of conversation in the UK, and I'd assume so in Australia as well. And that is Alyssa, and how she has sort of been perceived throughout the show. Like, I think it's worth discussing that, and what your opinion is on her and her perception of how she was on the show.
I think Alyssa said it was pretty fair up until probably the last 3 weeks of the show. After the couples retreat, they really put the breakdown of the relationship solely on her. I've said this in interviews. I've said this in the boys' chat. Duncan has read this for himself. So I'm not speaking out of school here. They could have cut a completely different season of MAFS for Alyssa and Duncan had they shown the story from her perspective.
Right.
So Duncan texted her and said, let's get through final vows, then we can sort of, try life on the outside. He bought concert tickets for a concert that was happening 3 weeks after the final vows. He was talking about taking Alyssa to see his sisters the following day after final vows. Like, Duncan definitely was leading her on into final vows.
Oh.
And his argument to that is that, well, that shows that his intentions were to continue things, and that he just had a big decision to make, and he decided to go the other way at final vows, which is the purpose of final vows, right?
Yeah.
That's fair enough. That's his argument. Her argument is that she got led on, manipulated, lied to, and dragged through the process when all she wanted to do was go home and be with her son. And kind of, she tried, it didn't work out. She wanted to go home and move on with her life.
Yeah.
And him keeping her there was quite manipulative and deceitful. Those are the two perspectives. That's his perspective and her perspective, gathered by what they've told me. And like I said, if they'd cut the season from her perspective, it would have played out very differently for her.
Do you think Duncan would have looked like more of a bad guy?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. He would have looked like the knight in shining armor that just turned at the last minute and, played her.
Very interesting, because it seemed...
You guys don't understand. They can do anything they want with these edits.
Well, we do understand. Yeah.
I don't know if it's the same for the UK.
I really don't think you guys, like, from what I've gathered from what you guys have said, you guys get a much fairer edit. Like, they really try and show the storyline as it happened. Over here, they edit things like me smirking at Claire and Jesse breaking up. I'm not even looking in their fucking direction.
Yeah, and it's one...
they put it in because it makes me look more evil.
That one shot holds so much power. Yeah.
That's how they play with the edit in order to portray a character. And you guys don't seem to suffer that over there, but we get that over here all the time.
I think we do to an extent, but I would agree it seems much more apparent. And having been in the show as well, I'm much more acutely aware of seeing it on screen. Like, I could tell when things were edited a bit more, but the general viewer doesn't know that as much.
At the start of the interview, I played you a soundbite of Bronte speaking, where they changed her voice to 3 different interviews in order to put a sentence together.
Yeah.
I don't know if that would be allowed over in the UK.
No, we could sue them, I think. I think I might be done with questions. So...
I really appreciate that, because we've had connection issues and we've been going a long time. So thank you, Harrison. My only round off would be obviously, you would say that there's kind of a heavy edit involved and it's a different kind of portrayal as you as a person. Watching it back though, and I suppose friends and family and things watching it back, is there anything that you did take from that where you're like, right, I need to work on that, or anything where you saw yourself and you were like, I need to do a bit of self-reflection?
The biggest thing is just the guy that walked into MAFS. The guy that walked into MAFS and the guy that walked out are 2 pretty different guys. So the guy that walked in was this very confident, ladies' man. And the guy that walked out was... I kind of had all my perspectives changed on what was important. I was 33. Not long after I got out, I turned 33, and I just went, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to meet someone special, and, I want all of the things that I think the good thing about Married at First Sight was it made me realize that I still wanted all of the things that I tried to do in my relationship with my son's mother.
Yeah.
Right.
And I wanted all those things again. I was prepared. MAFS showed me that I was prepared to take that risk in order to find love, because I'd been pretty unlucky, and I was prepared to take that risk again. And in order to find love, you need to risk getting hurt. And MAFS made me realize that I was ready to get hurt again if it meant that I could gamble on finding love, which is really all anyone does when they go in search of someone special, right? So yeah, not long after I got off the show, I met Gina, and the rest is history. We started dating, and now I'm in a really happy relationship. So I think the biggest thing is that if I didn't go through MAFS, I probably wouldn't be in the relationship that I'm in now, and I'm really happy about that. So yeah, I think the change has already happened, if that makes sense.
So is there anything else that you want to add into this for the UK lot before we close off?
Yeah, I just think that the only thing I would add is that our season of MAFS is really edited for entertainment, not as a documentary. So the people, the portrayals, the things that get said, it's all heavily edited over here for entertainment purposes.
All right.
It's a bit more of a popcorn and a laugh kind of over here than it is a documentary more so over there. So
yeah, I think our one is also fairly entertainment value. I just think it's documented more close to the truth, maybe.
Yeah. Good way of putting it. You articulated it perfectly.
Thanks.
All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
All good.
All right. Well, you enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Yeah. What day is it over there?
Saturday morning.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay. Well, you too. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
All right. Thanks, mate. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Okay. So, how do you feel after that?
Do you know, I kind of have a similar perspective of Harrison going in that I've come out with. I don't like or really dislike him. I don't think he shows necessarily full narcissistic and manipulative tendencies. I don't think that's the case. I do think he got a heavy edit on the show. I do think that. And I think he's quite witty and he can be quite funny. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's difficult.
My opinion hasn't changed, but I've always said in the roundups that we've done and like when we've been talking, I've always sort of said like, I don't think that this is a crazy narcissist of a guy. I think that he's been heavily edited and I think he's funny. I think he's quite funny and quite intelligent. I'd imagine he'd be wildly irritating and I'd want to knock him out all the time. But in sort of I think I'd probably if we were friends, I think I would be friends with him. I think if we were in the same experiment, I think me and him would get on quite well. I don't know why. You know, everyone's going to come for us on this, but you know what? We can't just say what people want us to say. That is my feelings and opinion, and it is coming from a level of us understanding the process as well.
I was going to say, you know, obviously we have a different perspective on things. We've been through the process. We understand how it works. And it sounds like in Australia, it's an even more fully amplified version of that. And a lot of it is entertainment value. And I do think that's clear watching it. And, you know, I think we've all been victim, like, you know, every cast member of having something said about us or seeing, you know, a part of it on television and being like, I don't think that's how I acted, or like it's not portrayed in that way. But yeah, I don't know. I'm indifferent, really. I don't like him and I don't dislike him. Yeah, the jury's out.
You know, he gave some, you know, insights to some really tricky situations. So I'm like, editing that out and taking that out of context really does throw a very different shade on the entire thing. But, you know, these things are tricky, aren't they? Because we could have a conversation with someone else tomorrow.
I mean, I appreciate his honesty. He gave us some great, you know, inside scoop. And I like how he speaks candidly about things. And it did give us some more insight, which I really do appreciate. But yeah, it's just very interesting. Hopefully all of you listening will love a bit more insight from the man himself.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for watching or listening, whichever you're doing it on, whether it be podcasts, YouTube, clips on Instagram. Please like and subscribe. It really helps us. We are just getting this podcast going and we are really, really hoping that it does well. So please like and subscribe and click and follow and comment and everything. And we will see you for our next episode. But thank you so much.